Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel Grace and Bakes. So today we'll be making an all-time South African favorite. I know everybody loves this one. We'll be making some blueberry muffins. So stay tuned, we'll be starting very soon. And remember, if you'd like the recipe, it's in the description box below. So first up, I'm going to add 250 grams of margarine. So what I usually do is I just measure about half of the normal 500-gram brick of margarine that we get from the stores, and I section my half as well so that it's quicker and easier to beat down. And I'm going to put that in my mixer and mix for about 2 to 3 minutes, or just until it's soft and creamy. You can also use a fork or a whisk if you don't have a mixer, and you can use butter. Just try to avoid fat spreads because those don't work very well when you're baking. Next up, I'm going to add 2 1/4 cups of sugar. If you have a bit of a sweet tooth, you can add a bit more. Maybe make it 2 1/2 cups. If you don't like that much sugar, maybe leave it at 2 cups. And I'm going to add that to my beat down margarine, and I'm going to mix it again for about a minute or two, or just until they are combined. Next up, I'm adding my vanilla essence. So I'm going to add about a teaspoon of vanilla essence. Now don't do what I'm doing if it's your first time. You know, some of us just wait for the Holy Spirit to say "oh," and then we stop pouring. But if it's your first time, always make sure or try to measure out a teaspoon of vanilla and add it there, because if you add a bit of too much of vanilla, you will have an aftertaste. I'm going to add 3 eggs to my mixture. So try to beat and combine your eggs in a bowl first before adding them, because if one of your eggs is not okay, if it's rotten, then it's going to ruin your whole batter and you have to start afresh. So do it aside and then whisk them down and then add them to your batter afterwards. So I always try to scrape down the sides of my bowl while mixing, because you do get butter or margarine that sticks to the side of your bowl. So make sure that you scrape it down and then combine them before adding anything else, just so that you have an even mixture. So after adding my eggs, I'm going to mix them down for a further 1 to 2 minutes, or until I like the consistency, maybe even more if you're using your hand. Then I'm going to add 2 cups of milk, or about 500 milliliters, because I took half of a 1 liter bottle of milk. So 2 cups does equal approximately 500 milliliters, and I'm going to add it slowly so as to not overwhelm my batter. And I'm going to be monitoring the consistency, and if it's just about right what I'm adding, then I will not add all of it. But for me, I added all of it because I wanted it to be runny. So it's not going to be smooth at this point because you're mixing oil with the liquid, and you know they don't mix very well. So don't get too worried if you have lumps and bumps and clumps. It's completely part of the process. Now I'm going to add 4 cups of flour. So a cup, I used a normal tea or coffee mug, which is about 280 milliliters for my cup, but I didn't fill it to the brim. So I left about a centimeter of space between the end of the cup and my flour. So if you have a mug that is 240 milliliters, then that equals a cup. If it's 250 milliliters, it can still work, but anything above that, just try to leave a bit of space. Don't fill it to the brim, so that your measurement is almost equal. Okay, Okay, up next, I'm going to add my baking powder. So I add a teaspoon per cup of flour that I put in. So my 4 cups of flour is equals to 4 teaspoons of baking powder. So I'm going to cover my bowl using the top cover that came with the mixer, just because I'm working with flour. You know, as soon as I start mixing, it might pour all over me, and I don't want that. I'm trying to, at all costs, to avoid making a mess. So I'm going to cover it up and mix them until they're about combined, just about combined, you know, until I have a nice consistency, until I don't have bumps anymore, until my batter is smooth and it's runny. Your batter should be smooth and runny at the end of this. You don't want it to be too hard. If you can form a ball with it, then it's too hard, just add more milk. If you can't, if it's like water, it's not supposed to be too watery, but it should pour out of your bowl when you pour it. So next I'm going to add my blueberries. So I ended up using about 1.5 tubs of blueberries because I tried to use one, but it was just too little. I didn't like the number of blueberries I had compared to my flour. I didn't like the ratio, so I added 1.5 tubs. It's a 125 gram tub that I got. So if you have a bigger one, maybe it's 350, or if it's 500 grams, then you can use about one or half of it if it's 500. But for me, I used, let's just say, 200 grams in total. And using my wooden spoon, I just combine them by hand, more like folding my blueberries in. I don't want them mixed. I don't want any of my blueberries breaking, but I do want them to be combined with my flour. And that's what it looks like. So I'm just going to take my 12 muffin pan and I'm going to line it with muffin cups. If you don't have muffin cups, it's still completely okay. You can just grease your pan and add your batter into the muffin holes, if that's what they're called. So when filling your muffin cups, right, don't fill them completely because your batter is going to rise. So you must leave enough space for it to rise and to avoid pouring over. So I'm just going to fill it up to about 3/4 of my muffin pan, such that when they rise, there's still ample space for them to rise. I'm using a tablespoon to fill my muffin pan, but you can use whatever works for you. Just make sure that you measure them up to 3/4. So when you're done, just make sure you clean up any mess and just take it and just beat it down. Take your whole pan and beat it down a couple of times just to get rid of any air that might be in your muffins, because air bubbles in batter will leave a space when it's baked. You might find that your muffins will have holes in them, and I don't want that. If you don't mind, it's okay, but for me, I prefer them not to have that. I like consistency, so I always beat it down to get rid of any air bubbles. Now if you don't have a muffin pan, here's a plan for you. You can take your regular pan and just grease it and just pour your not entire, depending on how big it is, you can just pour your batter into it, and when it's done baking, you just cut it into squares, and instead of blueberry muffins, you have blueberry squares. Now I wanted to show you guys both, just in case you prefer squares over muffins, or just in case you don't have a muffin pan, you can still use your regular baking pan. So after pouring, you're just going to smooth it down using your spoon or a knife or a cake smoother even, just so that it's leveled and it's even before putting it into your oven. Don't forget to get rid of air bubbles. And there we go. So my muffins are all done, and this is what they look like. One thing I love about blueberries is that while baking, they actually cook and they melt down, releasing all the sweetness that is embodied in them, and it actually looks beautiful in baked goods. So this is what my squares look like. And that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you with the next recipe.